I wanted to be a member of the most powerful clique in school. If I wasn't already the head of it, I'd want the same thing. Come on, Veronica. You used to have a sense of humor.
School is different for everyone, but whether you remember it with fondness or disdain, there's one thing that everyone has in common. All the fucking cliques. Your school had them, my school had them, and if you didn't have them, you might have been homeschooled. It's the one thing that movies and TV and YA novels about magical dreamboats with crooked smiles and gold flecks in their eyes get right. Of course, it is exaggerated. Not all of the mean girls are flawless, beautiful, heavenly creatures, but they exist. School is full of cliques because the world is full of cliques. When you leave school, there will be cliques at work. If you become a stay-at-home parent, there will be cliques in the PTA.
Emergency PTA meeting tonight, tell all your friends.
Oh, I don't have any friends. I'm pretty isolated at home. I have 4 kids.
Okay, good. Please move along. Thank you. Emergency PTA meeting tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh my God, she just got all her sadness all over me.
They're everywhere. It's a small-scale form of age-old tribalism, sticking with what you know and with who you know and with the utmost loyalty. School is just the building block, but it's basically how we meet people and how we socialize, how we interact, etc., etc. The Adler and Adler study of 1998 determined that cliques were important to the social development of kids. So if you were that kid in kindergarten who was shunned from playing with other kids during recess, then don't worry. It was good for you. Also, I'm sorry. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like anything, social cliques can have many aversive effects, like how the sameness of a group and the group's unwillingness to open up to outsiders can make it harder for people to communicate with anyone else and easier for them to stereotype others. It can stunt a person's social group and make them more susceptible to peer pressure.
Every year, thousands of kids enter our high schools succumbing to terrible peer pressure. Let's face it, high school can be tough, and kids can be cruel, picking on others for just being different. Well, I say fuck them, because they don't know shit.
It also gives power to individuals who do things they wouldn't otherwise do alone, like, say, a mean girl who gossips and spreads rumors about someone they don't like. The presence of their group of friends, or, if you will, army of skanks, makes them feel empowered because they know their friends are loyal and that they'll support them even if they do something heinous. For years, people have speculated on what the true meaning is of the 1989 film Heathers, and if it even has one. You could probably make a Room 237-esque documentary detailing all the theories. I'll give you an example. The Heathers and Veronica wear signature colors. Red for Heather Chandler, green for Heather Duke, yellow for Heather McNamara, and blue for Veronica Sawyer. It's obvious what these colors represent. In some cultures, red represents fortune, wellness, and high status. All things that Heather Chandler has as the leader of the pack. And Veronica? Blue, like the blues. So what does it mean then that Heather Chandler is killed by a blue drink, that JD is shrouded in a blue light when he comes to Veronica's rescue? I'll tell you. The Civil War, the red states and the blue states, in 1861. Okay, that's gone on long enough. Written by Daniel Waters, Heathers is a dark comedy about high school cliques and the glorification of suicide. Waters had envisioned the original script as a 3-hour-long epic, and the person he had in mind to direct it? Stanley fucking Kubrick. Kubrick did a war film, he did a science fiction film, he did a horror film. What if Kubrick did a teen film? Waters recalled, thinking as he worked on the screenplay. So out of complete, robust, pretentious naivety, I thought, I'm gonna write a Stanley Kubrick teen film. Stanley Kubrick didn't end up directing the flick, but you have to admire Waters' ambition. The film found its director in Michael Lehman, who was one of the first people Waters showed the script to. At 200 pages, the script was very much a satirical deep dive into everything going on with teenagers at the time. PSAs about drunk driving and suicide, paired with a love for John Hughes and a cynical outlook, made Heathers what it was. It stood out so much from other teen films at the time that in the years after its release, film scholars would cite the movie as the death rattle to the John Hughes era of the teen comedy. And maybe it was a death rattle, but it was also an exciting new beginning. Or, as Joy and Gabriella might put it, the start of something new. And something new it was. You can bet on it. Okay, I'm done. The opening scene of Heathers prepares you for the world you're about to enter. 3 girls, poised and seemingly well-mannered, drink tea in a beautiful garden. They stand and walk in unison, stomping all over the pristine red roses, leaving damage in their wake. It's a moment that subverts your expectations on a small scale before pulling you into the cruel and darkly humorous world of teenagers. Our main character, Veronica, narrates through her diary entries, which she writes while wearing a monocle.
Real life sucks losers dry. If you want to fuck with the Eagles, you have to learn to fly.
Veronica is in with the popular clique, perhaps the most popular in school, a clique full of Heathers. Like all queen bees, Heather Chandler is vile and never misses an opportunity to talk down to others, even the people she considers her friends. And despite her brief screen time, she has some of the best one-liners in the movie.
Fuck me gently with the chainsaw. Do I look like Mother Teresa? My afterlife is so boring. If I have to sing Kumbaya one more time. Did you have a brain tumor for breakfast?
The Heathers are exclusive, but Veronica is bored with them.
It's just Heather. Why can't we talk to different kinds of people?
So they do. They talk to Veronica's old friend Betty Finn, the geeks, the stoners,
Sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads,
and the new kid, Jason Dean. JD for short. Veronica's frustration with Heather C's cruelty and self-centeredness comes to a head at a college frat party. The two have an argument that reaches its peak with one of the best lines ever.
I got paid in puke.
Lick it up, baby. Lick it up.
After that disaster, Veronica spends time with JD, and they both hatch a plan to play a prank on Heather C that turns into a murder, like these things tend to do. Thinking on his feet, JD says they can make the death look like a suicide to avoid being found out, and from this moment begins a phenomenon. There's a suggested uptick in the suicides at Westerberg High, because the most popular girl in school did it. The yearbook wants to put her suicide note, the one that Veronica wrote, in the yearbook. And after Veronica and JD do the same thing to Kurt and Ram, suicide becomes glorified. There's a song about it by the band Big Fun. When an unpopular character, Martha Dunstock, attempts to commit suicide and lives through it, Heather Duke, who has taken Heather Chandler's place, laughs it off.
It's another case of a geek trying to imitate the popular people of the school and failing miserably. Is that pate?
Heathers was a special kind of teen movie, and the studios had no idea how to promote it. The first poster released for it was saccharine and looked more like a rom-com than a satirical crime film. Michael Lehman denounced that first poster. When the movie came out, it was the floppiest kind of flop. On a budget of $3 million, the opening weekend saw the film earn a little over $100,000. But critically, it was admired. People called it brave and witty, and the best teen movie ever made. Heathers is a morbid comedy about peer pressure in high school, about teenage suicide, and about the deadliness of cliques that not only exclude, but also maim and kill. Because theories are fun, Heathers is about the Civil War, it's about the Cold War, it's about the breakup of the replacements, but what it's mainly about are cliques, social hierarchies, suicide glorification, and the psychology of mean girls. Although the film was received positively by critics, there was a lot of negative criticism from a different kind of critic. Parents. Parents who were concerned with their children watching a film that they thought glorified suicide instead of critiquing that very glorification. Despite feeling rejected by the casting director at her first audition, they apparently wanted Jennifer Connelly for the role, and didn't think Winona Ryder was pretty enough? Winona Ryder auditioned again because that critique of how the world glorifies suicide is what attracted her to the story. She even told the director that she didn't have to be paid for the movie, that she'd be more than happy to do it for free.
Actually just gone through something where a girl had committed suicide who was called everything from a freak, a witch, just a girl who dressed differently and who was kind of goth. And she committed suicide in my school. And then as soon as she committed suicide, everybody was talking about how great she was and saying that they were friends, and her funeral was huge. And it was like, and then I got the script, and, it just really struck me because I was so disgusted with the behavior.
Christian Slater had this to say when asked about the controversy.
To me, what the film does is it kind of glorifies how society, it laughs at how society glorifies suicide, I think. It's satirical and all those things. So, and there really is no suicide in the film, it's all murder, but, I'm a killer.
Today, shows like Riverdale and Elite boast themselves on being dark crime mysteries set in high school. Shows like these have a couple of things in common. They both went way downhill, and they may not have happened without Heathers or the 1985 film Better Off Dead, both of which took social issues arising amongst the teen population and satirized it to the point of gleeful absurdity. The script was about all the issues that we were talking about at the time, like teen suicide and drunk driving and any of the various one-line moral tales, and putting them all in a blender and mixing them up and throwing them at you in a way that you definitely didn't expect. And you're kind of going, whoa, am I allowed to laugh? These films sparked a new kind of teen movie that wasn't always lighthearted. Heather's influence in particular would bring us Cruel Intentions, shows like Gossip Girl and Glee, and more importantly, the 1999 film Jawbreaker.
Remember, everything is peachy keen.
Peachy fucking keen.
Heathers was unsuccessfully rebooted as a TV series in 2018. Its failure has been dissected many a time, so I won't add to it. I don't have anything clever to add anyway. I simply want to say that its failure maintains Jawbreaker's status as being the best piece of media inspired by Heathers, in my book at least. As a kid, I was afraid of Jawbreaker, but I was also drawn to it. It felt like a horror film, but a horror film with really cute outfits and memorable needle drops. This movie, debuting 10 years after Heathers, is what gave teen films the subgenre of killer cliques, which is, yes, a subgenre that I just made up, but I'm hopeful for its future. Like Heathers, Jawbreaker is a black comedy about the inner workings of social groups, of status and power, and, of course, murder. But unlike Heathers, it satirizes almost nothing and is transparent in its straightforward campiness. For the film's 15th anniversary, Darren Stein and Rose McGowan did an interview with Dazed magazine, where they were asked what the film was really about, whether it has a message to it, to which they both said, simply, no. That's what I love about it. It's so nihilistic. And from McGowan, it's an anti-message movie. In this suburban, peachy fucking keen community, girls have a tradition of kidnapping each other on their birthdays for a day of fun, pancakes, light hazing, and an all-around exhilarating day. Writer-director Darren Stein, who grew up in a community like this one, wanted to make a horror film on what would happen if one of those fake kidnappings went horribly, horribly wrong. But as he started writing, he realized it was more of a black comedy, and he went with it. After accidentally killing their best friend Liz with a Jawbreaker candy, the remaining trio of a popular quartet, Courtney, Julie, and Foxy, decide to cover up the murder. Courtney, now the leader, dictates what everyone does and how they do it to ensure no one gets caught. In the midst of their cover-up, though, they're seen by Fern, the school's invisible girl, who is fascinated by Liz. In exchange for her silence, they offer her the chance to be one of them, to take Liz's place. And like Cinderella, she is transformed into Violet. Violet verges on becoming more popular than Liz and Courtney combined. Julie, ridden with guilt, leaves the clique and makes friends with people she normally wouldn't talk to. All the while Pam Grier is investigating Liz's death. look at her. And Julie just wants to come clean. The movie consists of a bunch of twists and turns of manipulation, catchy one-liners, high fashion, and corruption. In Stein's own words, Jawbreaker is inspired by a lot of things. Heathers is just one of them. Stein found encouragement in other films he grew up on and some that were essential to the gay community, like Rocky Horror Picture Show and Carrie and Grease. The dialogue makes no attempt to be grounded or easy. It's wordy, the cadence of its delivery sounding more like something from the 1940s or 50s. Even Rose McGowan said she found inspiration for Courtney Shane in the film Leave Her to Heaven, specifically with the character played by Gene Tierney. The movie is dramatic and gleefully camp. Stein was unafraid to make a movie as true to himself as possible. That's why it's hard for me to not kind of love Jawbreaker. It's a flawed movie, but it's a movie that knows exactly what it is and what it wants to be and doesn't really care if anyone gets it. Because there's nothing to get, it just is, and it is boldly. From its plot, you can see the obvious Heathers influence, but from things like its wardrobe and its dialogue and Carol Kane, you can see its Rocky Horror influence, its Grease influence, and its Rock and Roll High School influence. Out of all the Queen Bee Clique teen movies I mentioned in this video, Jawbreaker is also the gayest one. The scene where Courtney Shane has her boyfriend give head to a popsicle has been, according to the director, the scene that people mention to him the most. Often cited as a scene that, quote, made me realize I was gay. I grew up on John Hughes movies, Grease, Heathers, Rock and Roll High School, and more subversive films like Carrie, The Shining, and Alien, The Hunger. So I think I was rebelling against the John Hughes films of the 80s because they were so heterosexual. There were no queer characters. Then there's Violette's fascination with Liz. Initially it seems more like she just wants to be friends with Liz, but it becomes clear that she's harboring a huge crush. And scenes like this.
No, honey, you're the bitch.
Oh, so aggressive, Julie. It kind of turns me on.
When the film premiered at festivals, it was applauded. But then, the Joel went to theaters and it was torn to shreds. For mainstream audiences, it proved to be too campy and too girly and too other. The movie plays by its own rules. It's not designed to appease an audience, and it vibes with queerness that is not overt. I think that was off-putting and upsetting to heterosexual critics. But it became a cult movie, so I'm happy the fans have the last word. Like many cult classics, it took a lot to get Jawbreaker off the ground, and in the end, the production was granted $3 million and only 30 days to shoot. Years later, Stein would share how stressful this was. He was a young director in his mid-20s, and every day, shooting the film, while fun and memorable, was emotionally taxing. Though the critical reception was harsh enough for Stein to not make another feature film until 2013 with GBF, what he ended up making in 1999 became a cult classic. A candy-colored goth cult classic. One of the numerous issues critics had with the film was that it lacked substance. All it is are mean girls and losers and cliques and popularity. And some might argue that these things aren't enough to make a substantive film, but I'd argue that they are enough, because the girl world of high school is complicated, and that's something that movies like Heathers and Jawbreaker understand, that there are What became clear to Michael Lehman in the 80s and to Darren Stein in the 90s was that girls, particularly mean girls and bullies, had an interesting way of taunting their enemies and their friends, and that sometimes the two were one and the same.
I just killed my best friend.
And your worst enemy.
Same difference.
The first glimmers of psychological research done on bullying amongst young teenagers was done by Dan A.O. No matter how I say it, I'm gonna fuck it up. In 1978, he published Aggression in the Schools, Bullies and Whipping Boys. Although his study did primarily focus on boys, it started to expose the more sinister aspects of social cliques and peer groups. The Adler and Adler study of 1998 on pre-adolescent culture and identity dove deep into the friendships of children and teenagers, including popularity and perceived power. The study points out the cons of such social groups, but also acknowledges that these social groups are necessary for kids. They learn how to make friends, how to communicate. A positive peer group can encourage them to focus in school or give them confidence. The downside is that since kids tend to be very cliquey and selective with their playmates, there's always the risk of someone getting left behind or harshly excluded. The kids left out of these social groups can have trouble socializing later and think that the way to make friends is to go up to someone they like and offer to make them a playlist. High school was not easy. It wasn't until years later that research started to circulate around girls, because where boys might bully someone by physically hurting them and taunting them, girls could be different. You had the occasional mean girl who started physical fights, but in girl world, all the fighting had to be sneaky. It's hard to pin down exactly when the term relational aggression was coined, but it was certainly a phenomenon in the late 90s and early 2000s. For a while, people didn't seem to think girls could bully other girls, that they all sat inside during recess, holding hands and making charm bracelets for each other. But then something happened, and Rachel Simmons published Odd Girl Out, The Hidden Culture of Aggression in Girls, and Rosalind Wiseman wrote Queen Bees and Wannabes. Both of these self-help / research books came out in 2002, and both of them had movie adaptations. Odd Girl Out became Odd Girl Out, the Lifetime movie starring Alexa Vega, the one that, if you're my age and have the same shit memory, you forgot existed until just now. And Queen Bees and Wannabes became Mean Girls, the instant classic that to this day makes us acknowledge October 3rd and wear pink on Wednesdays. Mean Girls is a film inspired directly from the book, but it's also comparable to Heathers and yes, even Jawbreaker. All three of these films are different in their approach to the subject matter. Heathers is a gruesome dark comedy not suited to everyone's taste. Jawbreaker is a pastel-colored high-camp romp, and Mean Girls is one of the best straight-up comedies to come out of the 2000s. But all of them are about high school, girl world, social cliques, and how the exclusion or inclusion of said cliques can affect individuals, especially the divide between these minute social classes. The movies and the people behind them never make the claim that cliques are inherently bad. After all, we're naturally inclined to align ourselves with people who like the same things we do. All of them are cognizant of this. The existence of these social groups isn't where things go sour. It's the division and the hierarchy. It's one group being perceived as being better than the other. It's the social groups being so closed off from one another that no one gets the chance to talk to anyone else, and so they rarely get to expand their worldview. One of the cons found in these researches of cliques is that some can be so close-knit and closed off that they rarely talk to or befriend anyone else. When things like bullying are involved, there's no outside perspective, so all the nasty tricks and taunts become normalized. I hate to do this, but you know how in Goodfellas, Karen says after she married Henry, they only ever hung out with other people in the mob? Only Jimmy and Tommy and Polly and Frankie and Jimmy 2 times, who got that name because he said everything twice, like,
I'm gonna go get the papers,
It's a lot like that. When we start Heathers, Veronica is bored and even annoyed with her friends. When she and Heather do the lunchtime poll, Heather gets annoyed and all Veronica can say is,
Heather, why can't we talk to different kinds of people?
Later, she even tells JD that she doesn't like her friends very much. And why would she? They play vile pranks on unsuspecting people, they harshly judge others, and they're self-serving and shallow. It isn't just that Veronica is bored with her friends, but she wants to be able to talk to and hang out with whoever she wants, like Betty Finn and Martha Dunstock. In essence, that's what Heathers is all about. It's the motive for killing Heather Chandler and Curtin Ram. He decides Heather's fate when she orchestrates the cruel prank on Martha in the cafeteria, and Curtin Ram's when he spots them bullying another kid and spouting homophobic slurs.
Curtin Ram had nothing to offer the school but date rapes and AIDS jokes.
It's Veronica's fascination with JD before she realizes,
do you actually think you're a rebel? You're not a rebel. You're fucking psychotic.
She wants her high school to be a nice place. She wants people to get along. She doesn't want anyone putting themselves above anyone else. And in the end, she takes charge and does exactly that. And Jawbreaker, after Fern walks in on the girl setting the scene for Liz's fake murder, Courtney draws her in and says,
I'm Courtney Shane. I don't think we've officially met, what with the cruel politics of high school and all.
The movie opens with a bit of narration from Fern. We're introduced to the beautiful ones, the flawless four. through her eyes, and the disconnect is clear. On the outside looking in, you can understand how someone like Courtney could be worlds away from someone like Fern. When Fern is made popular and transformed into Violet, her popularity does something interesting. She doesn't quite unite the different social groups, but all of them adore her equally. The captain of the cheerleading squad, played by Tatiana Ali, which low-key makes me kind of sad because Tatiana Ali was such a big star in the 90s, and I really wish she had the opportunity to star in her own high school movie like the ones mentioned here. But a punk girl lower on the social ladder than Violet even saves a bathroom stall for her. Violet talks to whoever she wants except Julie, and that, along with her burgeoning popularity, is what causes a rift between her and Courtney. Then Courtney betrays Violet, posting pictures of her before her makeover, and everyone turns against her because they're shallow and they want to believe in the beautiful ones, the flawless four. And if by their standards you're not that naturally, then you're deceitful, and being deceitful is worse than being Satan in heels. What really gets these different social groups to come together is when Courtney is revealed to have killed Liz.
I killed Liz. I killed the teen dreams. Deal with it. I killed Liz. I killed the teen dreams.
Bad bitch!
And they all team up to put her to shame. The sentiment is the same in Mean Girls. After everything happens with the burn book and at prom, people befriend other people. Karen hangs out with Katie and Kevin DePore. Regina's on the lacrosse team and has no beef with Katie. People get along, and that's all anyone really wants. Upon its release, Mean Girls was critically acclaimed and a commercial success, unlike Heathers, which had positive reviews but was a box office bomb, and Jawbreaker, which critics took joy in lambasting and people barely saw in theaters. But all three of these movies have left a lasting impression on generations decades after their release. All very different films tonally, but their shared theme of social cliques and high school hierarchies has stood the test of time, because those social hierarchies and those bullies we come to know in school are really just a preview for what's out in Candyman, Regina George, and Bing Bong from Inside Out have in common. Yes, they're all fashion icons, but they're also given power by the act of remembrance and belief.
You are not content with the stories, so I was obliged to come.
In Inside Out, Bing Bong vanishes after the person who created him stops believing in his existence. In Mean Girls, numerous characters throughout the school share stories and theories about Regina George and later about Katie. The gossip about them creates a lore that gives them mystique and in turn makes them more popular and more powerful than they already were. And Candyman is given power by those who believe in him and by those who challenge his existence. In any social circle, a person's status is given by those around them. Celebrities don't become famous by themselves. There's a vehicle of people behind them. Fans who celebrate their wins, who elevate their name, who build the pedestal they're put on. And that's why it's so easy for things like celebrity and popularity and social influence to crumble. In Heathers and Jawbreaker, high school is like a kingdom. The popular girl is the queen. Liz is a good queen, kind, respectful, and understanding, ruling with empathy and not cruelty.
Courtney ruled with terror, but Liz ruled with kindness. She was like the Princess Di of Reagan High.
Courtney makes things interesting, but she's not beloved in the same way that Liz was. In the end, when everyone turns on her, it is because of Liz's death. The people chose their queen. Their queen was murdered, so prepare to die. This moment was inspired both by the end of Carrie and the cover for the 1994 album by Hole. Live through this. It's kind of funny. Mean Girls sort of almost ends at prom. Jawbreaker ends at prom. And in the original Heathers ending, JD successfully blew up the school and everyone got along in heaven where they attended prom together.
The original ending was the bomb was strapped to me and I give this amazing speech on the steps of the school and the camera moves in on my face and then it cuts to black and you hear my voice go boom.
But we end in a big prom in heaven with the punch bowl filled with the blue chemical.
But I do love the ending as it is. I love that he lights my cigarette.
Proms can be a cathartic affair, huh? Sometimes bloody, but always cathartic. In Heather's, the reign had by Heather C is taken over by Heather D, not simply because she decides to wear the red scrunchie, but because she takes charge and because the people choose her. They talk about her, they feed the monster. A monster who turns against her friends, makes light of tragedies, and maintains the divide between social groups. There can only be one queen bee, and in some strange, fascinating way, the people choose who it is. The people make the place, the people make the queen. I really only wanted to make this because I enjoyed Jawbreaker a lot as a child. I know I shouldn't have been watching it. Who cares? It turned out not terrible. And out of the 3 main movies I discussed here, this was the only one whose influence has been downplayed and undermined throughout the years. It was ripped apart upon its release, but even though the harsh reviews stung, Darren Stein said he never felt ashamed of what he made. When asked whether the negative reception had an effect on his career, Stein said, "I'm sure it did. Everyone thinks of those things in the business. I didn't make a direct correlation to it because I'm proud of the film." In the pantheon of teen icons, Courtney Shane tends to get left out of the conversation. In the pantheon of teen movies in general, Jawbreaker generally gets left out of the conversation, which is unfortunate because it inspired so many other films, particularly Mean Girls. Its candy-colored style and dramatic flares have been praised by the likes of John Waters. In that Dazed interview I mentioned earlier, Darren Stein talked about the faint similarities between Mean Girls and Jawbreaker. He stated, "I remember going to see Mean Girls at the Chinese theater and being a little bit bitter because I felt like structurally it was pretty clear that it was influenced by Jawbreaker. But that being said, without Heathers there would be no Jawbreaker. Jawbreaker was influenced by Heathers. So I feel like it's all very space-time continuum in a way. A teen movie hierarchy / the passing of the torch. Heathers handed its niche down to Jawbreaker and Jawbreaker to Mean Girls and Mean Girls to Mean Girls 2, which we don't acknowledge. I gotta say, after rewatching all of these, I'm just desperate to see another high school comedy focused on a clique, but on the unfriendly black hotties. Also, before the credits roll for the thank yous to the Womanizer patrons, thank you Womanizer patrons, I have to say, actually, the existence of this video is all owed to them because I was trying to pick my December video and it was between this Jawbreaker Heathers thing and looking at Black Christmas through the years, and this one won the poll, and I'm happy about it because I'm happy to have an excuse to talk about cliques.